My name is Helen Vance, and until exactly 48 hours ago, I believed that talent, dedication, and love could shield a person from the cold calculus of the elite. I am 28 years old, a senior restoration architect at Sterling and Sons, one of the oldest, most ruthless architectural dynasties in New York. For 3 years, I was also the wife of Julian Sterling, the youngest son and designated crown prince of that dynasty. Our life felt like a flawless montage, a sprawling, light-filled loft in Tribeca, private gallery openings, charity galas where my designs were praised over vintage champagne, and quiet mornings where Julian would kiss my forehead and tell me we were building an empire together. I thought I had earned my seat at their table through pure merit. I was completely blind to the fact that to the Sterlings, people are either assets to be depreciated or liabilities to be liquidating. The trap snapped shut on our third wedding anniversary. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black silk, custom tuxedos, and suffocating wealth. Over 200 guests, billionaire investors, city planners, high-ranking politicians, and influential media figures, had gathered to celebrate the firm's crowning achievement, the Hudson Waterfront Revitalization Project. This project wasn't just a career milestone, it was my life's blood. For 18 grueling months, I had practically lived in the office, working 80-hour weeks, fueled by black coffee and sheer ambition, designing every pier, every structural foundation, and every promenade until my fingers literally cramped from rendering complex blueprints. It was supposed to be the night my work was officially validated by the industry. My father-in-law, Arthur Sterling, a man whose presence could freeze a room, stood at the mahogany podium. His booming voice echoed through the high-end sound system. Tonight, as we stand on the precipice of transforming Manhattan's skyline, we must also acknowledge the brilliant minds that bring these visions to life. To celebrate this historic milestone, and to honor my son Julian and his exceptional wife Helen, we have prepared a short retrospective of their journey with us. Let us turn our attention to the main screens. The grand crystal chandeliers dimmed. I smiled, tightening my grip on Julian's hand, expecting a heartwarming video of our wedding day or footage from our early site visits. Instead, the screen flickered violently and flashed a grainy, high-definition security camera feed with a glowing green timestamp, 2:14 a.m. the previous Tuesday. The camera was angled directly at the entrance of Sterling & Sons' high-security underground archive, a room that required biometric authentication and a uniquely encrypted executive security badge. The video showed a woman walking confidently down the corridor. She was wearing my signature beige wool trench coat, carrying my distinct custom-made structured leather designer handbag, and her hair was pinned back in the exact French twist I wore to the office every single day. The woman scanned my personal security badge at the terminal, entered the vault, plugged a high-capacity encrypted USB drive into the master server, and downloaded the entire intellectual property catalog of the Hudson Project blueprints. The video then seamlessly cut to a secondary hidden dashcam angle outside a dimly lit coffee shop in Queens, showing the exact same woman handing that USB drive over to Marcus Vance, the ruthless CEO of our fiercest competitor and, coincidentally, my estranged uncle. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the 200 guests in the Plaza ballroom. I could hear the sharp collective gasps, the rustle of silk dresses as people turned their heads, and the sudden terrifying weight of 100 judgment-filled eyes drilling into my back. My heart dropped into a bottomless, freezing abyss. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the visual lie playing out before me. That isn't me," I whispered, my voice trembling as I turned to look at my husband. "Julian, look at me. I was asleep right next to you on Tuesday night. You know I didn't leave the loft. Tell them. Tell your father." Julian slowly pulled his hand away from mine. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced instantly by a cold, perfectly rehearsed mask of deep betrayal and disgust. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed, like an actor hitting his cue on a Broadway stage. "How could you do this to us, Helen?" he said, his voice carrying flawlessly across the silent, acoustic-perfect room. "We gave you everything. We welcomed you into this family, we gave you a name, we gave you status, and you sold my family's legacy to your uncle? Was our marriage just an industrial espionage assignment for you? Before the words could even fully leave his mouth, two hulking corporate security guards stepped up to our table, flanking my chair. Arthur Sterling looked down at me from the elevated stage, his face devoid of any human emotion. He spoke directly into the microphone, cementing my public execution. Helen Vance, you are stripped of your title, your position, and your employment at Sterling & Sons effective immediately. Your security clearances are permanently revoked. Security will escort you out of this establishment. You are legally barred from entering any Sterling property, including the Tribeca loft. Your personal belongings will be cleared and dropped at a designated neutral location. Do not attempt to contact my son or any representative of this firm. I was marched out of the Plaza Hotel in my floor-length evening gown, flanked by guards, while the flashing cameras of local society journalists captured every second of my public ruin. They didn't even let me retrieve my coat from the cloakroom. As the icy night wind hit my bare shoulders, the horrifying reality began to crystallize. I hadn't lost my security badge. My trench coat and my handbag were sitting safely in my bedroom closet at that very moment. Whoever had framed me didn't just steal my badge, they had meticulous, unlimited access to my personal life, my schedule, and my identity, and they knew the exact blind spots of the firm's internal security network. By 3 o'clock in the morning, the freezing New York rain was pouring down in sheets, mixing with the ruined makeup and tears burning my face. I stood on the wet sidewalk outside our luxury Tribeca apartment building, barred from entering the lobby by a doorman who had smiled and held the door for me for 3 years, but who now looked straight past me as if I were a ghost. A nondescript silver delivery van pulled up abruptly to the curb. The side doors slid open and two burly men in unmarked jumpsuits carelessly hoisted 3 battered wet cardboard boxes onto the flooded pavement. They didn't say a single word. They slammed the doors and sped away, splashing dirty water over my evening dress. I knelt in the rain and opened the soggy boxes. Inside was a pathetic, calculated curation of my past. My high school yearbooks, my architecture degree from Cornell, a few worn-out college sketchbooks, and a handful of casual sweaters. Everything else, my expensive designer wardrobe, the diamond earrings my grandmother had left me, the fine art pieces I had personally curated for the loft, my legal documents, had been kept. I was being systematically erased. I pulled out my phone to call a lawyer, but the screen flashed a bleak, terrifying message. No service. Device deactivated by administrator. The account was part of the Sterling corporate family plan, and they had cut my digital throat within minutes of my eviction. I checked my banking app. Every single account had been frozen, flagged for fraudulent corporate activity and pending litigation. I was entirely stranded on the streets of Manhattan with exactly $12 in cash tucked inside my small evening clutch. Shivering, soaked to the bone, and running on pure survival adrenaline, I walked for over 2 hours through the dark industrial edges of the city, dragging my waterlogged boxes until I reached a small, rundown printing and digital archiving shop owned by Leo, my closest friend from architecture school. Leo was the only person who knew me before the Sterling money, the only one who knew how hard I had fought to build my career. When he unlocked the heavy steel door and saw me standing there, a ruined society bride shivering in a soaked gown next to melting cardboard boxes, he didn't ask a single question. He immediately dragged the boxes inside, wrapped a heavy wool printing blanket around my shoulders, and handed me a steaming mug of black coffee. "They set me up, Leo," I croaked, my voice cracking from the cold and the sheer psychological weight of the betrayal. "They projected a fabricated security tape at the gala. They told the entire world I sold the Hudson Project blueprints to Marcus Vance." Leo sat across from me at his digital workstation, his expression intensely grim. Without saying a word, he turned his dual-screen monitors around to show me the morning press. The media rollout was terrifyingly fast, clearly prepared days in advance. The headlines were already everywhere. Sterling & Sons architecture betrayed from within. Founder's daughter-in-law catches corporate espionage charges. The articles painted me as a greedy, vindictive mole who married into wealth just to strip mine a billion-dollar public project. But as I leaned closer to examine the featured image of the article, a paparazzi shot taken outside the Plaza Hotel right after I was thrown out, my breath completely caught in my throat. My vision blurred, and the room felt like it was spinning. Standing in the deep background of that photo, leaning casually against the hood of Julian's customized sports car, was a woman watching the chaos with a faint, mocking smile. It was my twin sister, Clara. Clara and I had been completely estranged for 5 years. She was the chaotic, deeply resentful shadow of my childhood, a girl who could never hold a job, who dropped out of 3 different colleges, and who harbored a toxic, burning envy of my academic successes, my architectural talent, and my high society marriage. But as I stared at the photo, a cold realization washed over me. Clara was chaotic, but she wasn't a criminal mastermind. She didn't know the first thing about corporate mainframe encryption, she didn't know how to replicate biometric security badges, and she certainly didn't have access to the internal schedules of Sterling and Sons. Then my eyes locked onto her neck. Glistening under the streetlights in the photo was a breathtaking, custom-cut canary diamond necklace. It was the exact one-of-a-kind piece that Julian had shown me a photograph of 3 weeks ago, telling me he had commissioned it as our special 3rd anniversary surprise. The pieces of the puzzle violently shattered and reassembled into a terrifyingly clear picture. This wasn't a sudden corporate security breach. This was a long-term, meticulously coordinated execution. Julian hadn't been tricked by the video at the gala. He helped script it. He had brought my unstable twin sister out of obscurity, fed her my clothes, my habits, my perfume, and my security badge, and used her to create the perfect digital double. But why? The Sterlings didn't lose the Hudson Project to a rival. They needed a catastrophic leak because the project itself was a massive financial fraud. 3 months ago, I had begun noticing strange discrepancies in our structural supply invoices, millions of dollars flowing into offshore accounts for materials that never arrived on site. The Sterlings had overleveraged their entire empire on a project they couldn't afford to build safely. By staging a massive public theft of the blueprints by an insider, they could instantly claim hundreds of millions in corporate insurance, legally delay the upcoming federal zoning audits, blame any future structural failures on sabotaged data, and completely destroy the one senior architect who was getting close to uncovering their financial crimes. Me. For 6 grueling months, I lived in the claustrophobic back room of Leo's industrial print shop. I traded my tailored designer dresses for heavy denim work jackets, steel-toed boots, and cheap thermals. I didn't spend my days weeping over a lost marriage or a stolen life. I spent them working with a cold surgical focus. With Leo's high-speed servers, specialized data recovery software, and my intimate structural knowledge of Sterling and Sons' internal bookkeeping, I began tracking the digital and physical supply chain of the Hudson Waterfront Revitalization Project. What I found was far worse than simple tax evasion. I discovered that Arthur and Julian Sterling had quietly modified my original, highly secure structural blueprints behind my back. To cut costs and pocket over $80 million in federal grants, they had altered the specifications for the deep-water foundational pylons. They were purchasing substandard porous concrete and low-grade structural steel through a network of shell corporations registered in the Bahamas and the Cayman Islands. The Hudson Waterfront Project wasn't a masterpiece, it was a structural time bomb. If constructed according to the degraded specifications Julian had approved, the main pedestrian pier and the high-rise commercial towers built on top of it would suffer catastrophic foundational failure and collapse into the river within 5 years of completion. They needed me to take the fall so that when the concrete inevitably cracked, they could point to the stolen and altered blueprints from the espionage scandal to shield themselves from corporate manslaughter charges. I knew that taking this evidence to the local New York authorities would be suicide. Arthur Sterling practically bankrolled the political action committees that selected the city's top prosecutors. Instead, I bypassed the local system entirely. I compiled a massive multi-gigabyte encrypted dossier containing every wire transfer, every substandard material manifest, The original blueprints contrasted with the fraudulent ones and the IP addresses of the offshore shell companies. I sent this package directly to the Federal Maritime and Infrastructure Safety Board and the Forensic Accounting Division of the FBI, but I didn't sign it with my name. I submitted the files anonymously under the digital moniker, the Cuckoo's Auditor. The trap was set for the highly publicized, live televised groundbreaking ceremony of the Hudson Project. I watched from a distance, standing among a crowd of construction workers, wearing a high-visibility vest and a hard hat, completely invisible to the high society elite. On the main stage, Julian stood looking smug and victorious. Standing right beside him, draped in a designer coat that used to hang in my closet, was Clara. She had successfully stepped into my nest, living my life, sleeping in my bed, and pretending to be the design consultant for a project she couldn't even read a blueprint for. She was the perfect cuckoo bird. As Arthur Sterling took the stage, surrounded by flashbulbs, and stepped up to a glass podium to sign the final federal construction clearance on a live national broadcast, the massive jumbotron screens behind him suddenly glitched. The glossy, high-budget promotional video of the future glass towers vanished into static, replaced instantly by a glaring, undeletable data stream. It wasn't a grainy security video this time. It was a high-resolution, crystal-clear matrix of bank routing numbers, physical test reports of defective steel shipments, and a hidden audio recording Leo and I had intercepted from Julian's private office line just 2 weeks prior. Julian's voice boomed out over the high-fidelity speakers, clear as day. Once the federal audit focuses entirely on Helen's planted laptop files, the insurance payout will clear. The concrete will hold long enough for us to liquidate our shares and exit the country. Clara is too stupid to notice, and Helen is completely broken. The silence that fell over the waterfront venue was deafening. The live television anchors froze in shock as the feed broadcasted the corporate confession to millions of households across the country. The federal agents didn't wait for the presentation to finish. Black SUVs screeched to a halt at the perimeter of the venue, and a dozen armed FBI agents moved in from the rear exits, handcuffs glinting in the morning sun. Arthur Sterling's expensive fountain pen froze mid-air as an agent stepped onto the stage and read him his rights. Julian panicked, attempting to sprint toward the VIP parking lot, but he was violently tackled to the ground by 2 federal officers, his custom suit tearing on the gravel. Clara stood entirely frozen on the center stage, staring at the screens as her stolen, fragile paradise shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces in a matter of seconds. I stood at the edge of the perimeter, watching the total collapse of the Sterling empire from the steps of the public library across the street. I pulled a temporary burner phone from my pocket, inserted a one-time SIM card, and sent a single final email to Julian's personal address, knowing it would ring on the phone currently being confiscated by federal agents. The email contained a single attachment, the original, unredacted geological survey of the Hudson Waterfront bedrock, proving that the specific parcel of land they had leveraged their entire family fortune and taking hundreds of millions in loans to buy was completely unstable and utterly unbuildable. The text of the email read, "You threw me out into the pouring rain because you thought I was a fragile asset you could easily liquidate. You forgot a fundamental rule of engineering, Julian. An architect always knows exactly which walls hold up the house and exactly how much weight it takes to bring the roof crashing down. Enjoy the collapse." I removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed the pieces into a nearby trash bin. I turned my back on the flashing police lights, the screaming sirens, and the ruins of my past, walking away into the crisp, clean morning air. The velvet cage was completely destroyed, and the architecture of my new life was entirely beautifully my own.